Join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter with Good Day Dakota.
Welcome back. It is 6:43. Well, this hurricane season will be remembered as a devastating one, especially for those who live along the Florida Gulf Coast who were decimated by Hurricane Michael. But did you know that hurricane and typhoons can actually interact with each other and at times even dance with one another? Meteorologist Robert Suhr is here to explain this rare phenomenon. Robert?
Yeah, Alicia, it's a phenomenon that doesn't get a lot of play and it doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it certainly has the fascination of meteorologists and people that love the weather in general. We're talking about the Fujiwhara effect, and you can see here this picture I've put up on the screen here. These are two typhoons out in the Pacific. This is Modi and Typhoon Parma, and this is how the interaction begins, and we'll get into that in just a second. But first, some background here on the Fujiwhara effect. Now, this was discovered after a man named Sakahue Fujiwhara, who discovered the phenomenon way back in 1921. He was experimenting with fluids, and that's how you have to think of the atmosphere. We know that the atmosphere is typically mostly air, but it really works as a fluid. Everything interacts with each other, and there is definitely a cause and effect with the atmosphere. What happens upstream definitely can have a direct impact on what happens downstream. So you're probably asking yourself, how does this work? Well, you need two tropical cyclones that are generally within 1,000 miles of each other. And when that happens, their circulations begin to affect each other to the point where they will begin to rotate around each other and around a central point between the two storms. Now, when that happens, one of those storms begins to take over and becomes dominant, eventually swallowing up the other storm and becoming one massive storm before eventually moving on to wherever its projected course may be, whether it's the coast or generally out to sea. There have been a few documented cases of this happening. The most recent example was actually last year with Hurricane Matthew, which impacted the East Coast. Here's a great satellite picture from back in the late 90s. This is Tropical Storm Yule and Tropical Depression 16W, and you can see these storms really beginning to dance around each other. And they eventually did merge into one storm and move out to sea. So it's a very interesting phenomenon. It can have devastating impacts, or it can actually help to steer a storm away from the coast or pull it away. But when it does happen, it definitely keeps the interest of the meteorological community, and it's happened before and it will certainly happen again. So I hope you enjoyed that little lesson on the Fujiwhara effect this morning. Right now we're going to take a look at what's coming up next on CBS This Morning.